Ladies and gentlemen, we all know them. The ones who drain us, who twist words, who make us question our own reality. Toxic people. And let's be honest, dealing with them isn't easy. But here's the truth, you have more power than you think. So today, I want to share 7 clever ways to handle toxic people without losing yourself in the process. Boundaries. We hear this word all the time, but let's talk about what it really means, not just in theory, but in action. Because when dealing with toxic people, boundaries are your first line of defense. Now, let's be honest. Setting boundaries isn't easy, especially if you've been conditioned to keep the peace, to be the bigger person, to avoid conflict at all costs. You might have grown up in a home where boundaries weren't respected. Maybe you've been in relationships where setting limits only led to more manipulation. So you learn to bend, to accommodate, to shrink yourself just to keep things from escalating. But here's the truth, your well-being matters, and boundaries are how you protect it. A boundary is not about controlling someone else's behavior, it's about controlling what you allow in your space. It's the invisible line that says, this is what I accept, this is what I don't. It's about creating a safe emotional environment for yourself, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. So how do you actually do this? Before you can set boundaries, you have to know what they are. What behaviors make you feel drained, disrespected, or unsafe? What patterns have you tolerated for too long? Maybe it's a friend who constantly guilt trips you into doing things you don't want to do. Maybe it's a coworker who dumps their work on you and takes the credit. Maybe it's a family member who criticizes every choice you make. Identify what feels toxic, what makes you feel uneasy, what crosses the line. Because if you don't know where your boundaries are, how can you enforce them? Here's where a lot of people get stuck. They assume that others should just know their boundaries. But toxic people, they don't operate that way. If you don't clearly express what is and isn't acceptable, they'll keep pushing until they find where you break. So how do you communicate boundaries effectively? You keep it simple, direct, and firm. I'm not comfortable discussing this topic. I can't take on extra work this week. If you continue to raise your voice at me, I'm leaving this conversation. Notice what's missing? Justification. Over-explaining. Apologies, you don't need to justify your boundaries to someone who consistently violates them. You don't owe them a 10-minute explanation. You don't need to soften it to make them feel better. A boundary is a statement, not a debate. And if they don't like it, that's their discomfort to sit with, not yours. Here's where most people struggle. They set the boundary, but they don't follow through. And toxic people, they're testing you. They're watching to see if you actually mean it. Because here's the thing, a boundary without consequences is just a suggestion. If someone keeps crossing the line and you keep allowing it, they learn one thing, your boundaries are flexible. So what does enforcing boundaries actually look like? If someone keeps speaking to you disrespectfully, you walk away from the conversation. If a friend constantly drains your energy with negativity, you reduce how much time you spend with them. If a coworker keeps piling their work on you, you stop taking responsibility for their tasks. It's not about threats. It's not about convincing them to change. It's about changing your own response and reinforcing what you will and won't tolerate. Toxic people don't like boundaries. Why? Because they benefit from you not having them. The moment you start setting limits, expect pushback. They might call you selfish. They might try to guilt trip you. They might act like the victim and paint you as the bad guy. But let's call that what it really is, manipulation. And when it happens, you have to hold your ground. Remind yourself it's not your job to make toxic people comfortable at your expense. The more consistent you are, the sooner they'll realize that their usual tactics don't work on you anymore. This might be the hardest part, because for so long you've been told that setting boundaries is mean, that prioritizing yourself is selfish, that keeping the peace is more important than your own well-being. But let me tell you something, boundaries are not selfish, they are self-respect. You are not responsible for other people's reactions. You are not responsible for managing their emotions. And if someone makes you feel guilty for setting a boundary, that's just more proof that you needed one in the first place. Boundaries aren't just something you set with toxic people. They're a way of life. They're about choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, self-respect over people-pleasing. And when you start living that way, when you stop apologizing for protecting your energy, you'll notice something. Toxic people won't stick around as much. They'll realize they can't manipulate or drain you like they used to. And the ones who respect your boundaries, they're the ones who truly deserve a place in your life. Drama, some people thrive on it. They stir the pot, create chaos, and seem to enjoy pulling others into their emotional storms. And if you're dealing with toxic people, you've probably seen this pattern before. But here's something to understand: drama only survives when it has an audience. When you refuse to participate, the show loses its power. The emotional roller coaster stops. The toxic cycle breaks. And yet disengaging from drama isn't always easy, especially when the person involved knows exactly how to provoke you. Maybe they play the victim. Maybe they push your buttons just to get a reaction. Maybe they twist your words until you feel like you have no choice but to defend yourself. But here's the truth: you always have a choice. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to take the bait. You don't have to let their chaos become your chaos. So how do you step out of the drama without feeling like you're letting them win? Toxic people have a way of pulling you in before you even realize what's happening. And they do it through patterns, predictable behaviors designed to provoke a reaction. Some of the most common drama traps include playing the victim. No matter what happens, they're never at fault. They exaggerate, twist events, and expect you to step in and fix things for them. Gossiping and stirring conflict. They thrive on pitting people against each other, making vague statements like, "Did you hear what she said about you?" just to create tension. Gaslighting and manipulation. They deny things they said or did, making you question your own memory and perception. Passive-aggressive comments. Instead of addressing issues directly, they use sarcasm, backhanded compliments, or subtle jabs to get under your skin. The moment you can recognize these patterns, you gain the power to step back. Because when you see it for what it is, a game designed to pull you in, you realize you don't have to play. Nothing fuels drama like a strong reaction. Toxic people love when you get defensive, when you argue, when you feel the need to prove your point. Why? Because the more emotionally invested you are, the more control they have. So what's the best response? No response at all. Imagine someone making a dramatic accusation expecting you to fight back. Instead of arguing, you calmly say, "I see things differently," and move on. Or someone trying to start a fight, raising their voice, waiting for you to snap. Instead of matching their energy, you simply say, "I'm not going to have this conversation right now." Silence is powerful. Indifference is even more powerful. When you stop giving them what they want, your emotional energy, they start losing interest. You can't control what toxic people do, but you can control how you respond, or if you even respond at all. Instead of getting sucked into their negativity, set the tone for how you want to engage. If they're complaining nonstop, shift the conversation or remove yourself from it. If they're trying to argue, keep your answers short and neutral. If they're spreading gossip, change the subject or say, "I don't get involved in that." Toxic people will try to pull you down to their level. Your job is to stay grounded. Because the moment you lower yourself into their drama, they've already won. One of the biggest ways people get trapped in drama is by over-explaining. You feel the need to defend yourself, to prove your point, to make them understand. But here's what you need to know: toxic people don't want to understand. They don't want resolution. They want reaction. So when they throw accusations at you, when they twist your words, when they try to make you feel guilty, resist the urge to explain yourself. Instead, practice short, firm statements. "I don't see it that way. I'm not discussing this. That's your opinion." End of conversation. No long explanations, no justifications, just firm boundaries. Toxic people love to offload their emotional baggage onto others. They call you just to vent. They expect you to absorb their negativity. They treat you like a dumping ground for all their frustrations. And because you're a kind person, you listen. You offer advice. You try to help. But over time, you realize it's a cycle. Nothing ever changes. No matter how much support you give, they stay in the same toxic patterns. So here's a hard truth. It's not your job to carry their emotional weight. If someone constantly drains you with their negativity, it's okay to step back, to stop answering every dramatic phone call, to limit how much energy you give them. Because the more you engage, the more they expect. The moment you stop, they're forced to either deal with their own issues or find another audience. Your energy is precious. Where you focus, it determines how you feel mentally, emotionally, even physically. And drama. It's a thief. It steals your peace. It drains your time. It distracts you from the things that actually matter. So every time you feel yourself getting pulled into someone else's chaos, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this something I even need to be involved in? What happens if I simply don't respond? Because the reality is not everything needs your reaction. Not every argument needs to be won. Not every toxic person needs to be confronted. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply disengage. Toxic people have a way of making you question yourself. They plant seeds of doubt, subtly or blatantly, until you begin to wonder if you're the problem. Maybe they criticize you constantly, make you feel small, or dismiss your feelings like they don't matter. Maybe they manipulate situations to make you second-guess your own reality. And when you're surrounded by that energy long enough, it's easy to forget who you are. But here's the thing, your worth isn't something they get to define. It isn't up for debate. It doesn't shrink just because someone else refuses to see it. It doesn't disappear just because they try to convince you otherwise. Your worth is non-negotiable. And staying rooted in it means refusing to let toxic people distort your sense of self. It means standing firm, even when they try to shake your foundation. But how do you do that when someone has spent so much time tearing you down? Toxic people don't always attack your self-worth outright. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's disguised as concern or just joking or constructive criticism. But over time, it chips away at you. Some signs that someone is trying to erode your self-worth: they make you feel like you're never good enough. No matter what you do, it's not quite right. They always find something to criticize. They dismiss your emotions. When you express hurt, they say you're overreacting. When you share excitement, they act indifferent. They compare you to others. Whether it's a sibling, a coworker, or a stranger, they subtly suggest that you fall short. They twist your words. You say one thing, they turn it into something else, usually something negative. They make you question your own reality. Gaslighting is their tool of choice. They deny things they've said or done, making you doubt yourself. The first step in staying rooted in your worth is recognizing when someone is trying to shake it. Because once you see it clearly, it loses some of its power. Not everything someone says about you is true. Not every opinion holds weight. But when toxic people speak, they speak with conviction as if their judgment of you is fact. And if you're not careful, you start to absorb their version of you instead of your own. So here's a powerful question to ask yourself. Is this their opinion, or is this my truth? If they say you're too sensitive, but you simply value deep emotions, that's their opinion, not your truth. If they say you're not good enough, but you've worked hard and grown in ways they refuse to acknowledge, that's their opinion, not your truth. If they try to make you feel like a burden, but you bring love, kindness, and light into the world, that's their opinion, not your truth. Their words don't define you. Your truth does. And part of staying rooted in your worth is refusing to carry labels that were never yours to begin with. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is expecting a toxic person to validate your worth. If they refuse to see your value, no amount of proving, explaining, or pleasing will ever change that. You could bend over backward trying to gain their approval, and it still wouldn't be enough because they need you to doubt yourself. It gives them control. But here's a truth that changes everything. Your worth isn't something that needs to be earned. It just is. You don't need someone else to confirm that you're valuable. You don't need someone else's permission to feel worthy. The right people, those who truly care for you, will see your worth without you having to convince them. So if you find yourself constantly chasing validation from someone who withholds it, it's time to stop running. Because your worth isn't in their hands. It never was. If you've been around toxic people long enough, their words start to become your own. Maybe you've caught yourself thinking, maybe I am difficult. Maybe I don't deserve better. Maybe I'm just not enough. But here's the truth, your inner voice matters just as much as anyone else's. Maybe even more. So the question is, are you speaking to yourself in a way that reinforces your worth? Or are you repeating the toxic words that were never meant for you? Because what you tell yourself shapes how you see yourself. If you wouldn't say something to a friend, don't say it to yourself. If you wouldn't let someone else speak to you that way, don't allow it in your own thoughts. Replace self-criticism with self-compassion. Replace doubt with belief. Replace the lies you've been told with the truth of who you really are. You are not meant to be around people who make you feel small. You are not meant to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. The right people, the ones who truly see you, will reflect your worth back to you. They will remind you who you are when you forget. They will lift you up instead of tearing you down. So ask yourself, who in your life makes you feel seen, valued, and respected? And who makes you feel like you have to prove your worth? Because the company you keep has a powerful impact on how you see yourself. If you surround yourself with people who appreciate your light, it becomes easier to keep it shining. And the more rooted you are in your worth, the less room there is for anyone who tries to diminish it. Empathy is one of the most powerful human qualities. It allows us to connect, to understand, to see beyond surface level actions and into the deeper struggles of others. It's what makes us kind, compassionate, and emotionally intelligent. But when it comes to toxic people, empathy can become a double-edged sword. Because here's what often happens. You see their pain. You recognize that their behavior comes from past wounds, insecurities, or struggles they haven't healed from. And because you understand it, you excuse it. You tell yourself they didn't mean it, or they're just going through a hard time, or if I just love them enough, they'll change. And before you know it, you've justified their actions at the expense of your own well-being. Empathy should never mean tolerating mistreatment. It should never be a reason to stay in harmful situations. It is possible to understand someone's pain without allowing them to cause you pain. So how do you balance compassion with self-respect? Toxic behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. People who manipulate, control, or mistreat others often have wounds of their own. Maybe they grew up in an unhealthy environment. Maybe they never learned how to regulate their emotions. Maybe they are carrying deep-seated insecurities that they project onto others. And understanding this can bring clarity. It can help you see why they act the way they do. But understanding is not the same as accepting. Just because you can see where their pain comes from doesn't mean it's your job to fix it. Just because they struggle doesn't mean you have to be their emotional punching bag. You can feel for them without letting them drag you down. Empathy says, I see your pain. But self-respect says, I won't let your pain destroy me. Both can exist at the same time. One of the biggest dangers of unchecked empathy is that it can lead to rationalizing toxic behavior. They just had a bad day. But what about the other days they didn't mean to hurt me? But does it keep happening? They're just under a lot of stress. But aren't we all at some point? There is a difference between someone having a rough moment and someone who consistently disregards your feelings, disrespects your boundaries, or manipulates situations to their advantage. A bad day is not an excuse for mistreatment. Past trauma is not an excuse for cruelty. Personal struggles are not an excuse to harm others. You can recognize that someone is struggling and still hold them accountable for how they treat you. Because at the end of the day, hurt people don't have to hurt people. Many people go through pain and still choose to be kind, self-aware, and respectful. The difference: they take responsibility for their own healing instead of making others pay for it. If you're naturally empathetic, setting boundaries with toxic people can feel wrong at first. You might worry that you're abandoning them, that you're being harsh, that you should be more understanding. But boundaries are not about punishment. They are about protection. Protection of your time, energy, and emotional well-being. And when someone is constantly draining you, making you feel small, or treating you unfairly, it is not unkind to protect yourself. Here's the hard truth. If someone gets upset when you set boundaries, it means they benefited from you not having them. And if someone truly values you, they will respect your limits. If they don't, that tells you everything you need to know. So how do you set boundaries with empathy? Be clear but kind. I care about you, but I can't keep having this conversation when it always turns toxic. Stand firm without over-explaining. I understand you're upset, but I won't tolerate being spoken to this way. Don't feel obligated to fix their emotions. I see that you're struggling, but I can't take this on for you. You can be compassionate without sacrificing yourself. Toxic people know when you're empathetic, and sometimes they use it as a tool to manipulate you. They might constantly play the victim so you feel guilty for setting boundaries. Use their struggles as a way to avoid accountability. Say things like, I thought you were a kind person, when you try to enforce limits. But real empathy isn't one-sided. It doesn't mean absorbing someone else's pain while they disregard yours. It doesn't mean making endless excuses for someone who refuses to change. And if someone only values your kindness when it benefits them, that's not a relationship, that's an emotional transaction. You are not responsible for carrying the weight of someone else's unhealed wounds. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and for them is to walk away. Because staying in a toxic dynamic doesn't help either of you. It enables their behavior. It drains your energy. It keeps both of you stuck in an unhealthy pattern. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you wish them harm. It simply means you recognize that you can't heal someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own growth. You can love someone and still choose yourself. You can wish them well and still walk away. You can have empathy and still refuse to accept mistreatment. Both things can be true. The energy you allow into your life matters. It shapes your thoughts, your emotions, and even the way you see yourself. If you are constantly surrounded by negativity, people who criticize, doubt, and drain you, it becomes incredibly difficult to stay hopeful, confident, and motivated. Toxic environments pull you down before you even realize it's happening. But the good news is that the opposite is also true. When you intentionally surround yourself with positivity, with people who uplift, encourage, and inspire, you start to feel lighter, stronger, and more capable. Positivity isn't about ignoring challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing what kind of energy you allow into your life. It's about being intentional with the relationships you cultivate, the conversations you engage in, and the environments you create for yourself. Not everyone in your life brings the same energy. Some people are lifters. They encourage, support, and believe in you. Others are drainers. They leave you feeling exhausted, insecure, or unworthy. Think about the people you interact with the most. Ask yourself, who makes me feel good about myself? Who celebrates my wins without jealousy? Who listens with kindness instead of judgment? Who challenges me to grow in a healthy way? These are the people you want to spend more time with. When you surround yourself with those who bring out the best in you, you naturally start to feel more confident and at peace. On the other hand, if someone consistently leaves you feeling stressed, guilty, or drained, it may be time to set boundaries or reduce their influence in your life. You don't always have the luxury of cutting out every negative person in your life. Sometimes they're coworkers, family members, or old friends. But you can control how much energy you give them. If someone is constantly complaining, gossiping, or bringing you down, consider limiting your time with them. You don't have to answer every call or attend every gathering. Steering conversations towards something uplifting. If they start complaining, redirect the conversation to something positive. Refusing to engage in negativity. If they are gossiping or criticizing, simply don't participate. You are not obligated to absorb the negativity of others. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. The space you live and work in has a huge impact on your mood and mindset. A cluttered, chaotic environment can add stress, while a clean, calming space can help you feel at ease. Some simple ways to cultivate a more positive environment: surround yourself with reminders of your worth, quotes, affirmations, or photos that make you feel inspired. To clutter your space, a messy room or workspace can contribute to mental fog and stress. Play uplifting music or podcasts. The sounds around you influence your thoughts. Incorporate small moments of joy. A candle, a cozy chair, fresh flowers, whatever makes your space feel good. Your surroundings should reflect how you want to feel. If you want more peace, create an environment that supports it. What you feed your mind is just as important as what you feed your body. If you're constantly consuming negative news, toxic social media, or content that fuels fear and insecurity, it will impact your mindset. Instead, be intentional about what you allow in. Follow inspiring and uplifting social media accounts. Unfollow anyone who makes you feel bad about yourself. Read books that expand your mind and encourage growth. Choose content that empowers you. Watch shows and listen to music that uplift you. If it makes you feel worse, it's not worth your time. You can't always control what happens in the world, but you can control how much negativity you let into your mind. Choose wisely. There's a difference between people who see possibilities and people who only see obstacles. People with a growth mindset believe in learning, resilience, and continuous improvement. They focus on solutions, not just problems. people with a fixed mindset believe things will never change. They often complain, blame, and resist growth. When you surround yourself with people who are always learning, evolving, and working towards something meaningful, that energy rubs off on you. Their belief in themselves encourages you to believe in yourself. Their motivation becomes contagious. Seek out conversations that inspire, friendships that encourage, and communities that push you toward your best self. Energy is contagious. Just as negativity spreads, so does kindness, encouragement, and optimism. If you want more positivity in your life, become a source of it. Be the person who lifts others up. Compliment someone, offer encouragement, celebrate their wins. Choose to see the good in situations, even when things are tough. Focus on what can be learned or improved. Practice gratitude daily. The more you focus on what's good, the more good you will notice. When you become what you want to attract, you naturally draw more of it into your life. Not everything or everyone is meant to stay in your life forever. Sometimes holding on to toxic relationships, outdated beliefs, or old patterns prevents you from making room for better things. Ask yourself, what am I holding on to that is keeping me stuck? What relationships, habits, or thoughts no longer serve my growth? What would my life look like if I surrounded myself only with things that bring me peace and joy? Letting go isn't always easy. But when you make space for positivity, life has a way of filling that space with people and experiences that align with your highest self. There is a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes undeniable, when you realize that staying is doing more harm than good. A moment when you recognize that no amount of love, patience, or understanding can change a situation that is breaking you. A moment when you understand that walking away is not weakness, it is strength. But knowing when to walk away, that's the hard part, because when you care about someone, when you've invested time, energy, and emotion, the idea of leaving feels heavy. It feels like failure, like giving up, like admitting defeat. But the truth is, walking away is sometimes the most courageous choice you can make. It means choosing yourself over cycles that no longer serve you. It means trusting that your peace, your happiness, and your well-being matter more than clinging to something that hurts you. Boundaries are not just requests. They are the foundation of healthy relationships. They define what you will and will not accept. They protect your emotional and mental well-being. And when someone repeatedly ignores or disrespects your boundaries, it's a clear sign that they do not value your needs. It starts small. Someone dismisses your feelings, oversteps in ways that seem minor, brushes off your concerns. But over time, you begin to realize that no matter how many times you express your limits, they continue to be crossed. If someone cannot respect your boundaries, they cannot respect you. And when that happens, staying only teaches them that their behavior is acceptable. Healthy relationships, whether friendships, romantic partnerships, or family connections, are built on mutual effort. Both people invest, support, and show up for each other. But when a relationship becomes one-sided, it drains you. You are always the one reaching out. You are always the one compromising. You are always the one making excuses for their behavior. You are always the one trying to keep the relationship alive. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, if I stop trying, would this relationship even exist? If the answer is no, it's time to accept that you are holding on to something that the other person has already let go of. You should not have to beg for the bare minimum. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with someone. Do you feel uplifted, understood, and supported? Or do you feel exhausted, insecure, and emotionally drained? Toxic relationships don't always look toxic on the surface. Sometimes they feel like walking on eggshells, constantly managing someone else's emotions, or feeling like you have to shrink yourself to keep the peace. If a relationship consistently leaves you feeling worse rather than better, it is not a healthy relationship. And staying in environments that drain you will eventually wear you down. Growth requires change. And in healthy relationships, when problems arise, both people take responsibility, make adjustments, and try to do better. But in toxic dynamics, problems don't get solved. They get recycled. You have the same fights, the same betrayals, the same disappointments over and over again. Promises are made but never kept. Apologies are given but never backed by real action. At some point, you have to stop hoping for change and start accepting reality. If someone's behavior has consistently shown you who they are, believe them. You can love someone deeply, but if they are not willing to grow, you cannot force them to. This is perhaps the most painful sign of all. There comes a point when staying in the wrong situation for too long starts to change you. You become more anxious, more self-doubting. You start making yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's comfort. You lose touch with the things that once made you happy. You start accepting things you never would have tolerated before. And one day you look in the mirror and realize that the person staring back at you is not the person you used to be. No relationship, no matter how much history, no matter how deep the attachment, is worth losing yourself over. You've communicated. You've been patient. You've set boundaries. You've tried to see their perspective. You've given chance after chance, but nothing changes. At some point, you have to stop fighting for a relationship that the other person is not willing to fight for with you. You have to stop trying to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you didn't try. It simply means you have finally realized that you deserve better. The hardest part of walking away is the fear of what comes next. What if I regret it? What if things could get better if I just tried harder? What if I end up alone? These are the questions that keep people stuck in unhealthy situations for far too long. But here's the truth: if staying is breaking you, if it is diminishing your happiness, your peace, and your sense of self, then leaving is not the real loss. The real loss would be staying in a place that is slowly destroying you. At the core of it all, dealing with toxic people is not about changing them, it's about protecting yourself. It's about recognizing your worth, setting firm boundaries, and refusing to engage in cycles of negativity that leave you drained. It's about staying grounded in who you are, using empathy without excusing harmful behavior, and surrounding yourself with people who uplift rather than diminish you. There will be moments when you have to make the difficult decision to walk away. It won't always be easy. It won't always be comfortable. But choosing yourself, choosing your peace, happiness, and well-being is never the wrong decision.